Hey there, my name's Brashler, and in this video, I want to talk to you about bus-to-bus routing on the Behringer X32 and how to actually get it to work. Now, if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear, no matter where you're starting from. So let's go ahead and dive in. Now, with the Behringer X32, you have 16 mix buses, which we can see by pulling up our bus master on our left fader bank or our two sets of bus masters on the right fader bank. Now, these 16 mix buses are mono, and by default, the Behringer X32 does not allow you to route a bus to another bus. So for instance, if you wanted to have your drums in a parallel drum bus and you wanted to send that to your streaming bus. So for instance, on my 11 and 12, this is what I have set for, say, my streaming bus. And if I was wanting to have my drums on a pair of mix buses and then my parallel drums on another pair of mix buses, and I wanted to send those to my recording bus, there's actually not a way default with the X32 to make that work. Now, there are a couple of workarounds to actually make it function, but there are some pretty big downsides, and those downsides are latency. Now, let me show you actually how to get a bus-to-bus routing working, and then I'll show you the better way of setting up your X32 for streaming if you were wanting to do some actual group bus routing and then have that go to your stream mix. So with our Behringer X32, I have some pink noise being generated here on my mix bus 1. So we can hear that. And I have that going to my stereo bus here. Now let's just imagine that this mix bus 1 is my parallel drum bus. And I was wanting to send that to my bus 11 and 12. Well, there's basically two ways that I could actually make this work. The first method is by using the effects rack. Now, what we could do is we could send our mix bus to the effects rack and then use the effects returns to then route to another bus. And to do this, we would go to our effects rack, and then we would select any of our effects racks 1 through 4, because those are the ones that have an effects return already built in. Now, in this case, I'm going to use my effects 4. Now, I could go and select, say, a compressor or something, but in this case, I'm going to show this with a stereographic EQ real fast. And so to do this, what we need to do is we need to change the source to be from that bus that we want to pull from. So in my case, my mix bus 1 that I have right here. So I'm going to go and select my mix bus 1, and then go to my second one and select my mix bus 1. And then from here, we need to route our output from our effects returns back into our recording bus. And so what we would do is we go to our effects returns, and here is our effects for left and right. And so from here, we would want to first unassign it from the stereo bus, and then we would want to route this to our mix bus 11 and 12, which is our recording bus or our streaming bus. So then what we could do is we could pull up our 9 through 16 on this side, hit sense on fader, and with effects for left and right selected, and then we could just push up our volume for our effects into our mix bus 11 and 12. And then what will happen is we can pull out of that, and then we can go back to our bus masters, and as I push this up, we will see that we have metering happening on our 11 and 12. Now, one problem with this is you are adding in latency, and we can listen to that by going back into our effects 4 and putting it back into the stereo bus. And then once I push this pink noise up, we are going to hear a very large difference in tonality. And that is called comb filtering. And so what we're hearing is we are hearing the original then mixed in with the latent version that's going through our effects rack. And so as I turn this down, it's going to come back sounding like pink noise again. And as I push this back up, it's going to add in that comb filtering. Now, what is happening here is there is an extra added latency by taking our mix bus, going into our effects rack for processing via a compressor or an EQ or whatever, and then having that return into our effects rack returns, and then being sent to that mix bus. Now, and by routing our mix bus through the effects rack, back into the effects returns, and then back into our stereo bus or any bus that we want to send it to, we are actually applying a 0.67. Gotta do that for my teenagers, sorry. But it is a 0.67 millisecond of latency that's added by going in through the effects rack. Now, depending on what effect you select, will increase that latency or bring it back down to that 0.67. So with our stereographic EQ, this is going to be our least latent effect emulation that we can select that has the least amount of latency. Now, with that being said, if we want to do this, we absolutely can. However, just know that anything that you're sending directly from a channel to that mix bus of your recording, and then anything that you're sending also to this parallel is going to be latent and cause this comb filtering sound that we're hearing. So to do this in the correct way, what we would need to do is we would need to send 2 full sets of drums to different buses and have all of those going through the same plugin path that we're choosing. So in this case, if I was wanting to have a parallel drums and a drum bus, I would need to send anything going through my parallel drums to both a drum bus and a parallel drum bus, and have both of them go through my effects rack to then come back into the effects returns and then go to my streaming bus. Now, this would be the same case if you were applying a plugin insert-wise into a mix bus and having your channels into that left-right bus, and then have that parallel drum bus have that plugin that's inserted. It would also cause that comb filtering. So just remember, if you're ever doing parallel compression with an effect that you're inserting, or doing this parallel compression through our mix bus, through our effects rack, back into our effects returns, you'll need to do 2 separate paths, one for the drums and one for the drum parallel. Now, the other way of doing this is by sending that mix bus to a channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute my effects for left, right, and then I'm going to go and pull up a channel. So in this case, I'm going to pull up channel 32. And once we do that, we can press select, press view in the configuration and preamp section, and then right here where it says source, I can actually go select my mix bus 1. And so I'm going to rotate this down until we get to bus 1, and I can press select there. And then if I go and pull up my mix bus 1 and unmute this, we can see that I have signal coming into my channel 32 here, because that's pulling from my mix bus 1. Now, if I push this up, we're going to hear that comb filtering come back. Now, by doing it through the channel method, it's going to apply a 0.17 millisecond of delay. So just adding in that little bit of latency is going to change the tonality of those inputs. And so you really have to be careful about how you route your audio through your console if you're wanting to do this bus-to-bus routing. Now, just remembering that if you're doing a parallel drum bus, you need to basically set up 4 mix buses if you're wanting to do stereo. 2 for our non-compressed and 2 for our compressed. Now, the very last thing that I want to mention is if you are wanting to do this bus-to-bus compression for our online stream or for a front-of-house mix. Let's first talk about the front-of-house mix. Again, we do need to set up a non-compressed drums and a compressed drums if we're wanting to do some parallel compression. Now, by doing this, what we would need to do is any of our channels, we would need to remove those channels from our left-right bus and make sure that those are going to our mix bus for our non-compressed, as well as going through to the mix bus of the compressed. And then those sets of mix buses, either 2 independent for mono or 4 with 2 linked for stereo, those would then go to the left-right bus. And so basically, we're having that same amount of latency for both sets of drums, the non-compressed and the compressed. Now, if we're wanting to just do this for an online stream, then instead of doing a bus-to-bus, it's very simple to do a bus to matrix and then use the matrix for your recording or for your stream. Because by default, this is already set up within the processing of the Behringer X32. And so if we go to our mix bus and I press select and I press view in the bus sends, we can see that I have my 6 matrix sends here. And so on my right fader bank, I can pull up right here, and here are my 6 matrices. Now, by default, I can send any of my mix buses to my matrix. And so in this case, I would choose to have my matrix be my recording send or my mix bus send for my stream. That way I can send any of my mix buses to this with no added latency. Now, just keep in mind, if you do insert an effect on any of your mix buses, you are adding in latency. So just keep that in mind. But this is one kind of creative way of doing bus-to-bus routing, which is not by default supported by the Behringer X32, but with some caveats of 1, taking up channels, and 2, adding in a little bit of latency, you can do it. So if you're wanting to add this into your very advanced routing of your Behringer X32, you can. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the X32 or the Wing, or really any of the production equipment that's out there, please post that comment in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that are going to be helpful for you. And if you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com, where I have some courses, some downloads for scenes and snippets, as well as some audio files that you can download for getting your mix in a better spot on the Behringer X32, the X-Air, or the Wing. So you can check that out at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.